Call me Justin Bieber. I like to.
And we are live, Alex. Despite many technical difficulties, but we've
good evening, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be speaking to you tonight.
Absolutely. We hope you can join. We're going to give you a minute or so to see if anyone says hi in the chat or anything before we get into the interview. But if not, as we're behind schedule, I think we'll let you dive in mid-interview. But anyway, Alex, between all these technical difficulties, I haven't had the time to ask how you're doing.
I'm very well, Isabel. I've been in Parliament this morning with a few meetings, and they went very well. So I'm doing well, all things considered.
That's brilliant. I'm glad they went well.
Thank you.
Sorry? You can tell us all about it in a bit more detail during the interview, as I'm sure it'll be relevant. Oh, I see someone's joined us. If you can just say hi in the chat. In fact, I'll post that as well. Hi, Michelle. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, good evening, Michelle. And you're doing okay, I assume, Isabel?
I'm doing all right. Yes, I've had a long day with trauma-informed training today, but it went well. So excited to see how today goes, I must say.
I'm really encouraged at the amount of the level of institutions and workplaces that are actually looking at trauma-informed practice with ever increasingly seriousness.
Absolutely. It's growing, not quite exponentially yet, but we're getting there.
Yes, I think it's like a rolling stone, isn't it? It always takes a while to get going, and then you can't stop it once the momentum's built up enough.
You really can't. Hi, Will. And no, absolutely. I mean, I think we both, I don't know actually, what year did you first get involved with WAVE? Because I know you've been involved with that as long as I have. I think I was 2015.
I think we've been involved around about the same time. I was March 2015.
Yeah, I think I was August. So you're just on the team a bit longer than I was.
It's all right. I'm a more senior colleague than you, but only by a couple of months.
There we go. And yeah, if I think back to what the situation for trauma informed was like then, it's grown
non-existent.
So absolutely.
Even some people, even individuals who worked in the workforce and in schools and health visitors, they had no idea what trauma-informed care was, let alone how to implement it. And we are starting to see that the conversation is now not so much moving from what is trauma-informed to how do we implement it? How do we do this stuff rather than what is this stuff exactly?
Exactly. I mean, I think it's one of the things we can mention today about political successes, but I know that Western Bartonshire getting their local council to agree to become trauma-informed and work with WAVE and work towards 70/30 was a huge step in that right direction. And there'll hopefully be others if we can get...
there's a motion actually going before Edinburgh Council on Thursday, which is calling for more or less the same thing as Western Bartonshire. So if you're watching Jay and Willie, that's a very great success on your part, and we do tip our hats to you.
Absolutely. I mean, it's all ambassadors who make that kind of possible. It's very, very proud to be part of this network right now. Anyway, I'll get things rolling as I think we've got a few people watching now. So first of all, hi everyone who's made it, and please do say hi in the chat if you're joining now. I'm Isabel, and I've been kind of working for WAVE for about 6 years now, as we've established, and I've been kind of running these live streams for the last few times. But I'm joined today by one of our oldest ambassadors and one of our most successful ambassadors, and currently our lead ambassador.
Inexperience, Isabel, not age. Inexperience, not age.
Absolutely. Alex Williamson, who I think we can happily say without any exaggeration has hands down gotten us the most MP endorsements for the 70/30 campaign. Do you happen to know the current endorsements off the top of your head, Alex?
There's 504 members of Parliament in the UK Parliament that have endorsed this, which works out something like 78%. I think I'd have to go away and do the math specifically, but it's quite a significant amount of number. Definitely over 3/4 of the Parliament are in agreement as to what we're trying to do.
Absolutely, and that has been absolutely down to all of your work, Alex, and even just in mentoring other ambassadors to get that push through. Because I remember how hard we were pushing for even a majority, and the fact that we can now say we've got that many is beyond impressive. So yeah,
not to mention as well that some political parties have actually adopted 70-30 as official policy. So there are actually political parties out there that have said, as far as we're concerned, your values are now our values, which is extraordinary, which is a quite extraordinary thing as well.
Absolutely, yeah. So Alex, I was wondering if you wanted to say anything to introduce yourself a bit more to anyone who doesn't.
Okay, well, I don't know what more I can add to that wonderful introduction you've given me, but yes, for those who don't know me, I'm Alex Williamson. I've been involved with WAVE for about 6 years. My primary job basically is to act as kind of the political face of WAVE and engage with politicians and councillors about how that 70-30 actually looks like on the ground, and what it means from a political perspective to actually pursue trauma-informed communities, and what it means to actually be serious about preventing adverse childhood experiences. So I go to Westminster, I go to Wales, I talk to people who are in positions of decision-making and convince them that there are tremendous yields to be had if you do go down the route that we're advocating.
Absolutely. And yeah, I think before I get into properly asking you questions, Alex, I just wanted to kind of mention how this kind of political approach fits into the wider 70-30 campaign. So for those of you who aren't very familiar with the 70-30 campaign or have seen this shared later on, the 70-30 campaign is aiming to reduce child abuse and neglect by 70% by 2030. And it's hoping to do this from kind of a two-pronged approach in a sense. So one is top-down and one is bottom-up. And the top-down is very much what Alex is involved in. It's in the policy change. It's in making sure that the funding is put towards prevention rather than dealing with the symptoms further down the line. It's really making sure that local government and national government is involved in this. And then the bottom-up side is getting ambassadors and local communities pushing for it. It's changing your workplace to become trauma informed. It's spreading the news. It's making sure that there is an ACE awareness in the whole community around you. And ultimately these feed into each other, because it's only when people really care about ACEs and care about trauma informed that politicians start to notice and pay attention. So that's kind of why this is absolutely essential to all that we're doing as a campaign. So I'm quite excited really for you to be able to share how we're doing that, Alex. I thought it was worth, as a first question and kind of a first thing for us to share, to look at what we're actually asking of politicians, if that makes sense. So I'm just going to share my screen for just a second, Alex, because we've got our campaign priorities on the website that I thought might be a good idea to show. Can you see my screen if I do that, or do I need to?
I can, yes, I can see that, yes.
Brilliant. So this is kind of on our website, and we're under campaign priorities. It's wavetrust.org/7030 if you're looking for it. And we've got specific asks for government, specific asks for health and local government, as well as general political parties and professional bodies. Alex, do you want to talk through these at all? Do you want me to read them? Do you want me to leave them on screen? What works for you?
Yeah, so basically it's more or less a lot of this is self-evident. I mean, the one thing we're asking as an absolute priority is that there has to be an investment here on the part of government. So we're basically asking that every local authority, UK government, needs to come out with a strategy for what they see the importance of the first 1001 days. So our campaign is based on the idea that the most important time for a child's life is during the 1001 days, because of the way that their brain is mapping, the way that they respond to the stimulation, be it positive or negative, from the adults and other people around them. So we're saying, first of all, that the government actually needs to recognise the importance of this era, or this period of time for a child, which, in fairness, they are beginning to understand. It's taken a long time of many years of campaigning, many years of speaking to people, but there is a sense very much that we do believe government's understanding this. So it's basically the government saying that this is an absolute priority of ours. We do understand that, and it is something we're going to pursue. And then obviously it's with local councils coming up with strategies. Again, it's about saying to local council, if you work with a family early enough, you get there early enough, you put a prevention plan in place, there's a huge economic and social yields to be had if you go down this route. Second one is actually something that has actually come to light this week. For those who aren't aware, the government, which I won't go into the political commentary on, during the 2010 to 2015 period, decided to cut back very extensively on the early years settings. So a lot of Sure Start centres were cut, a lot of health visitor numbers were cut. And obviously, from our point of view, that was completely detrimental to achieving 70-30, because if you don't have that early prevention, if you don't have that early intervention, it just becomes late prevention or late intervention. These issues don't simply go away because the safety net's been reduced. So in the spending review that's going to be announced at some point this week, the government actually said that they're going to be bringing a lot of that back, and 74 local authorities have actually been shortlisted to run a family hubs program. So we believe that one is actually going to be implemented very soon. So that's a really great success. And the third one is about ensuring that at the heart of every clinical commissioning group, there is a focus on crime prevention. So it's about local authorities saying, yes, we do want to prevent, and this is how we're going to go about it.
Absolutely. There we go. So yeah, I think that's most of the summary. If you want to look in more detail, as I said, it is on the website, and I can drop the link in our chat as well, if that's helpful to anyone. And yeah, we'll absolutely agree. We need more funding in the early years. I think that's what makes the biggest difference. It's the funding, and it's the recognition, really, that's where you can make the biggest difference. Because I think we've said in other live streams, people can be helped at any point in their lifetime. We fully believe that. But it's so much more effective when you do it as early as possible.
Absolutely. You think about the metaphor of a dam. It's much easier to prevent that dam from bursting in the first place, and almost always more efficient than simply waiting till the dam bursts and then acting. That's kind of the metaphor. That our goal with 70-30 is to try and stop that proverbial dam from bursting in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm seeing Will asking, so what do we do at a grassroots level? Well, on a grassroots level, there's kind of two sides to it. One of them is getting that political support. So making sure that you're contacting MPs, making sure that other people in your communities know to communicate this shift in values, if you will, to their local politicians. Let them know that that's what people care about. And the other side of things is slowly becoming more and more trauma informed in your own life, in your own communities. Spread it through your family, spread it through your workplace, spread it through anywhere you volunteer, spread it through schools your children go to, wherever you can, and find other passionate ambassadors. I know you've been doing amazing at that already, actually, Will, kind of getting people passionate and on board. Even just sharing your story can be something that reaches so many people and kind of lets them know that they should be getting involved in some way. So Alex may be able to add some more ideas, but there's much to be done at the grassroots level.
Yeah, and obviously at grassroots level, this is where change is going to really be seen as well, because councils will start being a bit more proactive and trying to address some of these problems. So about grassroots level, it's about basically letting your local community leaders know, letting your leaders know that this is very much the way to go, and the policies that need to be adopted.
Absolutely. So on to my next question, Alex. And you've hinted at this already, but where are we at now? So you said we're doing absolutely amazingly in Parliament in England at the moment, and we've got some things looking up in Scotland with Edinburgh and Western Bartonshire. What are we looking at as kind of a political situation with this campaign?
Well, as I said, coming back to the fact that the government seems to have reversed its complete structure around early help with bringing back these family hubs, and actually recognising that there is something to be had here by early intervention. I do think that we are in a very strong place to actually start building a infrastructure by which to achieve 70-30. I think the political climate over the last few years has perhaps been distracted by various issues which aren't relevant to this call. We'll all know what I'm referring to there. But given the fact that they actually have said, look, we need to go back and actually look at early intervention, that is a wonderful infrastructure to build on achieving 70-30, because there is a recognition there by central government that early intervention does need to be something that is happening. And obviously, once you've got the recognition that early intervention is happening, it then becomes much. My camera's just. Sorry, did the camera just go off there?
You're back that I can see you. You can try coming off the camera for a moment if that's easier.
Sorry. So yes, once you've got that recognition that early intervention is something that is an absolute priority for central government, it then becomes much easier to argue for them to take the next step, by which they can then start to address the issue of prevention.
Absolutely, and I think that's really worth saying. We're at a milestone moment, and it's a great moment to have this conversation between the two of us, Alex. Because
sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties at my end. My apologies, you didn't quite catch all of that.
We could hear you perfectly fine. We just couldn't see you.
Right. Well, I'm sorry about that.
I think we're back to a little bit of a delay, Alex. We'll keep an eye on the technical issues. I apologize to anyone if you see us waiting for a while. We're just waiting for the other person's response.
Yeah, such is modern technology, I'm afraid.
But yeah, absolutely.
Yes. If, for example, as well, that everything that's ever said or done is recorded in some capacity to another in a parliament, I can certainly see for myself that the amount of times adverse childhood experiences or the amount of time trauma informed has been recognised or debated has rapidly increased over the last 3 years. You go back and look at this over the last 10 years, it's barely mentioned at all. It's barely brought up. It's barely debated. It's barely scrutinised. And over the last 2 or 3 years, there's been a massive rush of politicians from all sides actually raising these issues and actually saying that this is something we need to take seriously. So there definitely has been a quite substantial culture change and a political change over the last 2 to 3 years. And that can be tangibly measured.
And it's really encouraging to kind of see that change happening in real time, to see that we can be having an impact and that people will listen to us once we put our voices out there, and that we can make a difference. And now that we have kind of got the attention of a lot of people, we kind of want to look at how can we actually take steps towards 70-30. Things like, funding for family hubs is a really important step in that, in showing concrete differences. And so I have a couple of questions myself. I'm just going to double check the chat to see if anyone's got any questions for you first, Alex.
No problem.
For example, Will's got another great one. How important is the voice of lived experience playing in changing the political landscape?
This is probably the most fundamental thing that could help us to achieve the political landscape. I mean, it's one thing to make an argument from an academic point of view. So it's one thing from, saying the science tells us this, the economies tell us this, the social policy tells us this. But when you have people coming forward and saying, look, I was failed by the system, the systems that are there to protect me, the systems that are there to support, are supposed to support me, failed, and they have to do better. You can't ignore lived experience. I quite happily hold my hands up and say I'm fortunate enough to not have a lived experience of adverse childhood experiences. I'm fortunate enough to not be traumatized or suffering with multiple ACEs. So my experience of these things is limited. I can only make the argument from an academic point of view. But when someone comes forward and says, look, I suffered abuse in my childhood, I suffered neglect in my childhood, people weren't there, people weren't listening to me, I had no hope. And because of that, my life fell into disrepair. That is a powerful story, and it's much more powerful than any kind of scientific or academic argument we can make, because it's proof that the on-the-ground services are not working for the people who need them the most.
Yeah. And I think also, remembering that politicians are just other human beings doing their job, like everyone else, they connect to people and they connect to stories. Statistics are useful and facts are useful, and they need to look at those when making their job, but ultimately they connect to other human beings exactly like we would. So I think lived experience is absolutely central to getting people's attention and to directing that attention to what matters most.
Yes, I completely agree, Isabel.
Exactly. Joint effort.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So yeah, my next question, Alex, and I think this is the one that every ambassador has wanted to ask you ever. So how do we get people to support the campaign?
I'm not. If it's about my PIN number, I'm afraid I'll have to decline to answer that one. I'm afraid.
No. But how do we get people on board from the start? What has been your technique? What gets people interested? What has helped us get that many endorsers for this campaign?
Okay, well, my technique has always been that you go and research the person you want to speak to. Most people are in politics because they want to change things for the better. They want to make their communities better. There's obviously great differentiation about how they feel they can change that and the direction of travel that the policy makers should be taking in order to achieve that. But there is a general consensus out there that people become involved in politics because they want to improve their community. So a lot of it comes down to research. A lot of it comes down to actually trying to understand what drives that particular person. You know, what's their worldview, what's important to them. You know, some people are concerned about knife crime, some people are concerned about violence, some people are concerned about growing rates of family breakdown. Some people are concerned about the economy isn't performing as strongly as another. And the wonderful thing about 70/30 is it's flexible enough to answer all those arguments. You know, we have a campaign here that points towards the source of violence. So we have a campaign here that says that violence is a learned behaviour. You know, babies and children don't come into this world wanting to stab people. They don't come into this world wanting to be violent. And that's kind of the basis of our campaign. So if you have someone who's saying, I'm really concerned about knife crime in my area, you can contact them and say, look, if you are concerned about knife crime, these are the origins of violence. Childhood trauma is the origins of violence. Conversely, if you're concerned about family breakdown, then again, if a politician is concerned about family breakdown, then again, it is a case of saying, look, these are the reasons. It's an intergenerational issue. Children see abuse, they commit abuse. Children see violence, they commit violence. And it's all intergenerational. So again, if you are concerned about families breaking down, 70/30 is the way to go. And conversely, if you're concerned about the state of the economy, then there's a whole lot of evidence to say that those who do experience adverse childhood experiences or trauma in their formative years go on to cost the state huge amounts of money, somewhere in the region of, depending what kind of scales or models you use, somewhere between the region of 20 to 30 billion pounds. And that is a huge economic yield. And I think it also as well, politicians really appreciate the fact that someone's taking the time to research them. Yeah. I don't, I'll try and find the wording for this. In an era where it's very easy to contact politicians without having to undertake too much effort on your behalf, i.e. you can just fire off an email. It's very easy for a lot of politicians to feel that people are just sending out mass emails and not trying to build a relationship with the MP. In theory, it's possible to just email all 650 MPs without very little effort on the part of anybody. And if you're an MP and you open your inbox and you find you've got 5,000 emails and they're all more or less saying the same thing, it becomes very grating and very demoralising. And that would be demoralising for anyone. And then conversely, they've got someone who's written to them saying, look, on the 16th of July 2017, you spoke about your concerns about violence. That's actually quite. That's actually quite a good thing for the MP, because the MP will think, well, this person really must want to speak to me if they're taking the time to research me. This person really must be interested in me if they've gone away and kind of marketed this to what I'm interested in, what my values are. And most of them kind of respond very positively to that. Not all of them do, and that's fine. There's any number of demands on anyone's time, that's fine. But when you come to an MP and say, look, I'm coming to you because of the things that you've said, and I think this can solve a problem that you've raised, or you've personally raised a problem, most of them are then quite willing to hear you out.
Absolutely. I'm just going to flag another comment. I know you were talking about MPs specifically, but we're talking more widely about representatives here. Councillors in the same way, and MSPs in Scotland, etc. Whoever has that ultimately power to make decisions that will impact the lives of so many people. Are the people who we want on board with this. Hi, Claire. Nice for you to join. If anyone has any further questions,
that's just it. You align 70/30 to the values of the individual, not the values of the individual to 70/30. You look where an individual is at themselves, and then you market this according to what their interests are. And the wonderful thing about this is that it's flexible enough to address pretty much any problem that somebody might be wanting to address, or a problem that someone's expressed concern about not being resolved adequately. This is flexible enough to address most problems.
I would take it even further. There's some obvious ones like knife crime and some of the ones you want, but even things like climate change can be linked to this. There's truly it's something that impacts every areas of our life. And I think what you were saying, Alex, about meeting someone where they're at is something that's true in the grassroots level as well. When talking to school teachers, when talking to family, when talking to whatever, just telling them, sharing an infographic, for example, just saying things point blank doesn't really connect with people. Whereas sharing your story and then working out what matters to them and approaching it from that perspective makes all the difference.
Yeah. Like there are schools out there at the moment that are really struggling because so many children are turning up with an inability to perform basic self-care upon themselves. You know, I know schools where you've got a child of 30 and a class of 30, and 8 or 9 of those children are turning up still wearing nappies, and they've got no motor skills. You know, so that while they're 5 or 6, you know, from a physical point of view, they're still 2 or 3. Imagine being the teacher that's got to teach that particular class. Imagine the amount of time that you have to spend with those children that are so far behind the rest of them. It's so natural that the other children will be reduced to the common denominator purely because of the time constraint. And that's what we're saying. That's what you have to recognise about how important this is. If there isn't an early intervention program, then a lot of these children are then going to fall into society, and they're going to fall out of the education system. They're going to fall into the criminal justice system. And that's why the prevention, if there isn't the prevention in the early years, it just cascades into other parts of society.
Mm-hmm. So I'm just saying hi to people in the chat. No, absolutely. I think there's so many things that could be solved through early intervention, and we really need to be pushing in all these different ways towards it. And I kind of I'm very grateful for the fact that we now have a very clear campaign ask and campaign priorities that we can share, because, you know, we can say these, you know, 3 things, these 5 things, these, you know, however many specific asks are what would have the biggest impact, and people can kind of take that and actually do something with it. That kind of leads me into my next question, Alex, which is, how do we engage them long term? And I know this is a conversation you and I have had previously. You know, some MPs ultimately endorse because, you know, 80% of their party already does. And some MPs might engage initially because they're like, yeah, this is a good idea. But then they get so swept up in their own job that they're not necessarily reminded of it constantly, and don't, you know, take those extra steps to bring this up better. So I was kind of wondering if you could talk to us a bit about relationship building.
Okay, well, I think the most important thing to realise is this simply can't be a priority for everyone, and we have to recognise that we can't. It's simply not possible. Speaking from a purely parliamentary point of view, it's not possible to have 650 champions. That isn't going to happen. People have demands on their time. You know, people have got other commitments, and that's fine. So ultimately, a lot of the people I have engaged with have just said, yes, I support this, but that's the extent to which I can go in the meantime, and that's fine, because, you know, they agree. They want to see us succeed, and that has to be a win. Normally, you can generally identify where people are at by an initial conversation. So, for example, the MP I was speaking with today is quite happy to become a champion for 70-30. He's quite happy to, you know, really push the government on this. He's quite happy to stand up, and he's quite happy to, you know, try and advocate as best he can, which is great. But I guess with the engagement long term is trying to keep that relationship going. So you've had a conversation with them, they agree, they've said they'll do various things, and then it's kind of incumbent upon the ambassador to then hold that particular MP to the commitments they've made. And it's always good to come back and, you know, kind of check in with them after 6 months, a year and a half, and, you know, kind of say, look, we're still going, we're still banging our drum on this, and, you know, your support is always greatly appreciated. So it's getting them to sign up is one thing, and that's great. It's then trying to build on that, and then to say, look, you know, are you happy to go further with this? I mean, there are debates in Parliament all the time around issues that can be brought back to 70-30, mental health, you know, substance abuse. These things go on an almost weekly basis. Yeah. And it's just about trying to be strategic in the ones that we think we can then be champions for the cause.
And I think that's the thing, Alex. It's a couple of things. Sorry, my brain thought of 3 ideas at the same time. One of them is kind of making sure that there's concrete actions that they can take. Things like bringing it up in relevant debates, or, you know, if you're talking about councillors, bringing up a motion to be able to see if your local council can make any decision along this, or, you know, giving them concrete ways in which they can support it that makes a real difference. You know, sharing their own story of why they're supporting on social media in a blog post could be another example. Like, there's many different ways that they can get involved and push this forward. But beyond that, you know, making sure that you're the one pushing the relationship forward, you know, stick a reminder in your calendar to chase them up 6 months from now, or make sure that you're keeping an eye on what they're doing. So if they vote a certain way against domestic abuse, you can follow it up with them and say, oh, I saw that you did this, that's great. Can, you know, maybe even approach them, not always with an ask, but maintaining that two-way relationship and keeping it going. and seeing.
Just let them know you're still there. Let them know you're still banging the drum.
And I'll also say here, we haven't mentioned it yet, Alex, which I'm quite surprised by. There's a difference between constituents getting in touch and people who aren't constituents.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, I mean, obviously, your constituency MP works for you, irrespective of whether in the government, irrespective of whether they happen to be a member of a political party that you don't happen to agree with or align yourself with in terms of values. They work for you. You are their customer, basically. So the MP is obligated to then act in your favour. So if you write to your MP or your councillor, at the very least, they've got to give you an audience. They've got to at least allow you to make their case to them. And that's obviously fine and good. But then I guess the question comes about, how do you engage someone who doesn't vote for you? And again, I think that comes back to doing the research. I think that comes back to looking at what that person's saying, looking at what that person's engaged with, and then trying to find a way to line 70-30 up to that. If you write to them and say, this is a great campaign and you should meet with me, they're going to go, okay, great. Well, I've got 100 other people who want to meet with me telling me their campaign's great. What is the USP? What does 70-30 and what does Wave offer that no other charity out there does? What differentiates 70-30 from everything else? And that's the trick. You have to kind of look at this as a business model and say, what have we got that no one else has? What are your values? What are our values? And what can we do together that nobody else can? And that's the challenge.
Absolutely. And I truly think that the answer to that for us is that focus on primary prevention. It's being able to always bring it back to that is what truly sets Wave apart, and sets 70-30 apart. Because in an amazing and positive way, we're starting to see more push in general around ACEs and trauma-informed.
Yes.
And in general, there have been many campaigns and causes and charities that are parallel to things that 70-30 does. But ultimately, we really bring that advantage to the table that we shouldn't downplay at any point.
And our USP is stopping this. I mean, obviously, Wave was started because it became obvious to our CEO that this hadn't changed in 60 years. Levels of child abuse and neglect had neither increased or decreased in 60 years, and that's our USP. We want to stop child abuse. We don't just want to manage the symptoms. I mean, obviously, we want to manage the symptoms, and we want to help. We want those policies in place for those who experience these things. But it has to go right back to prevention. It has to be about trying to stop these things in the first place. And clearly, there's some structural issue if these problems haven't been resolved for 60 years, and that's our USP. We have solutions to stop the flow of future victims.
Claire, I couldn't agree more on a strategy to approach people. If at first you don't succeed, try again. Absolutely. I think Alex.
Yeah, obviously, we're a little cravat on that, Claire. If they tell you they're not interested, then there's nothing to be gained by pursuing them over and over again. If you get a no, it's an absolute no. There's nothing wrong with knocking at the door, but if that door's been slammed shut, there's nothing to be gained by banging on it continuously. So yes, you're absolutely right.
I think Claire's right, but perhaps in a not as straightforward as you were saying. Try again to get to the goal. If that particular person isn't going to be the right champion, then focus on getting the right champions into the right.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, to give an example, I chased an MP for 2 years until they finally agreed to meet me, because they kept saying, yes, okay, Mr. Williamson, very nice. Yes, okay, Mr. Williamson, very nice. And they weren't going anywhere. And because I pursued it, they eventually realised how serious I was. And obviously, as Claire's alluded to, though, if you send an email and they don't reply and you just shrug your shoulders, or send a letter and they don't reply and you shrug your shoulders, and that's obviously not going to work. But if you chase it, then most of them will realise how serious they are. So my apologies if I misrepresented you there, Claire, but you're absolutely correct. It isn't just a case of sending an email and waiting for the MP to get back to you, or sending a letter. You have to chase it. You have to pursue it. Most people would be flattered if someone kept chasing them repeatedly, I'd imagine. So that's kind of it. It isn't just a case of sending an email and then assuming the MP or the MSP isn't interested and they get back to you. A lot of them do need to be chased, because I alluded to previously, some of these individuals have emails in excess of 3,000, 4,000 a day.
Yeah.
That's the reality of being an MP or an MSP in a digital world. You don't have to send letters anymore. You can just fire off an email, and that's it. So absolutely, if you don't get a response, then by all means, it is worth chasing.
Yeah. So I'm just having a quick look at the comments. Thank you for sharing, Leslie. Definitely. We've got some people in the chat, Alex, sharing their own personal experiences and lived experience. So we're seeing the
you have the advantage of me because I can't read that. So
well, there's various different ones scattered throughout the chat. So I'm going to recognize them, but not immediately bring them up unless they tie in. We might bring them back in the Q&A or things if we're waiting on questions.
Sure.
So I am going to kind of hint to anyone watching, please do drop any questions in the chat or in the comments, and I'll read them out in a moment. I've got one last question for Alex to answer from me before we kind of open it up more generally. And it's a very simple question, Alex. What's next? Where are we heading with this?
Well, what we're heading to ultimately is a political culture that values the nature of prevention over early intervention. So that's where we have to go with this. We have to get parliaments and councils to actually say we want to start preventing these things. We actually want long-term strategies in place by which we can bring rates of child abuse and neglect down, not simply investing more and more in managing the symptoms. That's where we need to go. And I do think the fact that the family hubs, which, the family hubs are basically a remodeling of the Sure Start model. I think the government's more or less admitted that this is more or less a reboot of Sure Start. So the fact that they've actually accepted that some of the things that were done during the 2010 to 2015 Parliament need to be reversed is a great indication that we are starting to turn the tide on this. And it's about, if that culture is there and there is a recognition that some of these things that were done during that period need to be reversed, then we are moving to an environment where our voices can be heard with ever increasingly with an ever increasingly loud voice.
Yeah, and it's absolutely about that culture change, Alex. I couldn't agree more. And I think you know this better than I do, but we've had the issue with the 70-30 campaign of, people's jobs being structured in a way that they only think in a few years' time, where and getting people to actually think, no, what can we do long term is a really big deal, because that isn't.
I'll quite happily speak to that. Myself and the CEO of Wave, George, many years ago went to, and I won't mention the gentleman here for obvious reasons, but myself and George went to see the director of a children's services for local authority. And he told me that he'd been getting pressure from above to cut his budgets by 2 to 3% a year. And, that was the pressure that was coming down on him from above. And he said, okay, yep, I'm looking at this, I agree, but I'm not going to be here in 10 years. You're asking me to spend more money at a time when I'm being told to cut money, and you're asking me to put policies in place that I won't be able to yield. So you're asking me to, not only you're asking me to put my job on the line, you're basically asking me to put myself in a position where the person who comes after me is going to yield the results that I put in place. And I can't do that. That's career suicide. I can't go against my council masters and go against the budget cuts I've been told. And I'm certainly not going to put the effort in to put these policies in place when all that's going to do is make the person coming after me better or look better. And that's the reality of what we're pushing against. And it's not that gentleman's fault. He is the director of children's services undoubtedly because he cares about children, and he wouldn't be in that position if he didn't want the best for kids. But that's the environment that's been created for that gentleman, and that's the environment that he has to work in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why when you phrased it earlier as culture change, it was so important. It's not just a shift in terms of pure policies, it's just a shift in how we think about things, because we have to think long term. We have to think about financial long term as well.
What's really brilliant about COVID, and I say this in the backdrop of the fact that thousands of people have died, livelihoods have been lost. We'll probably never go back to the way life was before. What COVID has proved, and the government, the world's reaction, or the world's government reaction to COVID, not just our government, is that if a crisis is immediate enough and it requires an immediate response, governments can find money. We were being told in 2017 that there was no money there, that austerity wasn't over, that this was going on long term and the government wouldn't change course. 2 years later, the government suddenly found billions of pounds to keep half the country on holiday. Why? Because they had to. And that's the point. If we make this a real cause and we champion this, we will force governments to take it seriously. And that's the fact. Money. The arguments around money are dead forevermore now. Governments have proved that if a crisis is immediate enough and it requires immediate response, money can be found. So it's no good saying anymore that we can't afford to do this. They've proven that they will respond accordingly when circumstances dictate.
Absolutely. And I think this, in a sense, is where lived experience comes in again, because, as we've said, before WAVE was created, nothing had changed for 50 years. And you kind of, you get desensitized. You don't see it as an immediate crisis, even though it's an absolute tragedy for these things to be happening, because you kind of see it as an ongoing long-term problem that you can't do much about. But it's when people bring in their lived experience and say, this shouldn't have happened to me and you could have done something about it, and this is how you can do it suddenly changes. Like, no, this is happening to so many other children right now. So many other adults are having to deal with the consequences of it. It's a crisis right this moment. And you should be doing something about it.
And that's the point that Willie was trying to raise. It's it's all real sitting in a classroom and working out probabilities and saying, look, if you've experienced 5 ACEs, you're 62.3% more likely to end up in the criminal justice system. Imagine if you've experienced 4 ACEs, you're 72% more likely to be excluded from school. You're 49% more likely to be unemployed on a long-term basis. That's fine. Statistics are a wonderful thing. When you do have people coming forward and saying, this is me, this is my life, this is what happened to me, that makes our story much more credible, because there are people out there who actually aren't just statistics. Every person who's experienced trauma and every person who's experienced abuse is a real person with a real story, and it's a real person, a real story who's been let down by a system, and that's much more powerful than any statistical data that we can put forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I've just highlighted Claire's comment here because I think thinking of it in positive terms as well as negative terms makes a difference. We know sharing lived experience of this is the terrible stuff that is happening now is important. But looking at the flip side of these are the amazing things that could be happening is just as powerful. There is a world where things are better and we can create that. And if you think of the same amount of money that was spent on COVID being spent on prevention.
Wow.
Just imagine for a moment, Alex, that the same amount that was spent on COVID was spent on prevention. We'd be in a completely different world.
Yeah.
A completely different world.
Would. And that's kind of our argument. You have that money. You've proven that money's available. You've proven that you're willing to spend when circumstances dictate. So there is really no excuse why you can't start investing in prevention. Mm-hmm. The economic argument has gone forevermore, or the lack of funding argument has disappeared forevermore. It's not credible anymore.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I was just also going to flag up Michelle's comment, just saying, that's why I choose to help others. And I think that's so true. We're seeing more and more people with lived experience start to share, especially now with Hearts of ACE and our Council of Lived Experience, and the amount of caring and hope and motivation and altruism amongst that community is what is going to push this forward. So thank you to everyone in the chat sharing. And Alex, unless you've got anything that you particularly wanted to share tonight, I'd move on to the Q&A.
No, I've got nothing to share, Isabel.
If anyone wants to drop any questions you have at all for Alex in the chat, and I'll expand that slightly beyond just the political, which we've spoken about today. He's also our lead ambassador managing the ambassador network. So if you have any questions about what it means to become an ambassador, as an ambassador, if you have any questions, please also drop them in the chat, and I'm sure one of us will be able to answer.
Feel free to ask me anything, guys. Completely open.
I'm going to read through the historic comments that we missed out on whilst talking as well, whilst I'm waiting. Yeah. Absolutely. We need to be teaching trauma-informed practices to police and schools and many more services. I think this is, again, more on the grassroots level than the political, but the shift, everything's interconnected. Once people, if you think of things like the local council, that is bodies that can give the funding to train police forces, health, schools, etc., etc. It slowly spreads throughout the entire community from either direction, really, bottom up or top and down.
I'll add to that as well, Willie. We've actually recently been commissioned by the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner in Hampshire to actually train the frontline services. So this is probation service, police, magistrates, judges on trauma. So we're actually working directly in Hampshire to deliver those services to the institutions that you're raising there.
So I'm just back on comments in the meantime. Yeah, and I think this is something else to say. You know, we've been talking about how to create relationships with MPs and with councillors and MSPs, etc. But if anyone is watching this later on, please do join us and become a 70/30 ambassador. And it's an amazing network that kind of lets you share your own experience, your own expertise, your own hopes, and really supports you in pushing forward and making a difference in your own local community.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, we need a network of people out there across the depth and breadth of the UK, talking about 70/30, raising it with councillors, getting local communities interested.
And absolutely, and I think, you know, we've given a lot of credit to Alex today, and rightly so, in getting so many MPs to endorse, but it's because the network has grown in those years as much as Alex's effort. You know, it's because there have been more people in their local community who could push for this, who could have those conversations, who contacted their MPs, that we're doing this. And, you know, if we were able to do that with a limited number of ambassadors, in a sense, they're already a really great network. Imagine what we could do with even 3 more people in different areas that haven't been approached yet.
I'll give you actually an example of that. I wrote to an MP who, again, will have to remain nameless. We're not here to name and shame people. And I put forward what was I thought was a perfect coherent argument, and the person came back and said, you know, you're not one of my constituents. I'm exercising my fully legitimate right to not speak with you. And I was like, okay, fine, not a problem. About 2 months later, we had an ambassador come through who was actually a constituent of the MP, and I sent over exactly the same draft, and the MP pretty much bit that person's hand off and, you know, jumped on board with all of this. And that's the difference. You know, MPs are well within their rights to say, I'm not going to speak to you, you're not a constituent. And I don't think any less of them for that. You know, again, they have pressures on their time, any number of people wanting to speak to them. But as constituents, you have a direct access to your MP. You have a direct access to the person who goes to Parliament and can question the government and put in written questions on your behalf. And that's the difference.
So I'm just seeing some great comments here. I'm just seeing where we last broke off. I'm seeing, how are other countries doing with their campaigns? I'm going to jump in on this one, as I'm slightly more international at the moment. I'm actually based in Italy at the moment, working long distance. And I've also been to a couple of conferences on a more global level and networking with some people in the US. And I will say that there is all kinds of things going on in the world in very different ways. A couple of the conversations I've had in the US, I'm seeing that they are, in some senses, miles ahead with trauma-informed training and things, but there are areas where on a political level, there is nothing. You know, they might have many, many schools on board and moving things forward, but they've not managed to talk things through there. I know that in Italy specifically, there is starting to be an awareness of trauma, and there is some trauma training happening, but there's nothing currently cohesive on a political level. And I know that some other countries are starting to look at it in a slightly different way, but I would say it's a very varied approach. And hopefully once, you know, we've got the UK to a point that it can be an example, it will spread far beyond just the UK, as all of these issues are not limited to this area, really.
No, I mean, obviously the goal of 70/30 is to bring about a reduction purely within the constraints of the United Kingdom. But like most things, America is way ahead of the curve. I mean, the whole ACE study and the whole ACE ethos actually rose out of America. It was America that pioneered it. It was America that brought these issues to the international community, and it's America that's actually leading the way. I mean, there's quite a lot of trauma-informed prisons in America. There's a lot of trauma-informed schools. Bills have actually been passed at the national government level around trauma, and one of our actual partner organisations in America is leading on that. And if you come on the ambassador call next Thursday, little plug here, you'll get to hear directly from one of those individuals actually. So next Thursday on our call, we've actually got someone coming from our sister organisation in America to actually speak about what they're doing. So if you want to hear about what is going on in America, next Thursday at 7 o'clock is the place to be.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. And to anyone who isn't an ambassador yet, we have bi-monthly ambassador calls with all of the ambassadors who can make it. And we always have amazing guest speakers. And it's an opportunity to share success stories, ask questions, get further training and link up. So absolutely, if you're thinking to sign up, that's a motivation to do it quickly so you can make it on the call.
And obviously what we will emphasize as well is that this very much goes at your pace. So we don't expect you to jump in at the deep end and, you know, start firing off 10 or 15 emails a day to everybody. You know, you go at your pace, you go at a pace you're comfortable with. We're here as a team to support you. And, you know, obviously if you're signing up to be an ambassador, it's something you've got to be comfortable with. And, you know, it's down to you to decide how much you want to do or how little you do. And, you know, it's very much on you to decide how much you want to do with it.
Absolutely. Another quick one from Will, but I won't spend too long on it because we've got a few other good questions as well. So what keeps you motivated on a daily basis, Alex?
Do you want to go first, Isabel, or shall I?
You go ahead first. I'm going to have a quick look at the questions.
All right, sure. Thank you. What keeps me motivated on I mean, this isn't a normal job. You know, this isn't something that you can clock in at 9 o'clock and leave at 5 o'clock. This is something, you know, we work on 24 hours a day. And what keeps me motivated is knowing that I am making a change in the world. What keeps me motivated is knowing that there are people out there who are listening. What keeps me motivated is the fact that I know for a fact that we are winning the argument. I can see that. And it's basically about, you know, how many people actually have the opportunity to change the world. How many people actually have the opportunity and the ability and the capacity to change the world. And that's what we're doing here. We actually are changing the world. And that is so important. And, you know, one day when I'm in my twilight years, and, you know, hopefully not for many years now, but we're all on that scale. I mean, one day in my twilight years, I want to look back and say, you know, the world became a better place because of something I did. The world was better, the infrastructure was better, the systems were better, and that was down to things that we all did as a network. And that's what drives me. The fact that actually when I am looking back at what I've achieved, and, you know, maybe I'm not going to be a millionaire. I'm not going to have, you know, the yacht. I'm not going to have the mansion. But, you know, that's not what's driving me. What's driving me is the ability to actually bring about real substantial change to our world and our society.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to echo what you've said, really, Alex. It's seeing those successes. It's seeing the change in real time. You know, I've been involved for 6 years, and it's already a completely different world around me, in a sense. And I know that it's still just the immediate world around me and just the connections I've made. But considering we started out basically shouting into a void, and this was, you know, with Wave having laid a lot of groundwork before either of us came along, to kind of see that groundwork that Wave had laid before us and to see our own work kind of start to have that kind of an impact has been extremely motivating. And I think on the days when it's a bit harder or you're not getting through, it's conversations like these, and it's the support from the wider network that reminds me that actually we are making
the days when I'm up till 2 o'clock filling out a tax return form, which you know, none of us want to be there at 2 o'clock in the morning doing our accounts, but that's what keeps me going. You know, the fact that we have a really good campaign here, and the fact that it is starting to get traction.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to jump to probably one of the more important questions, which is, what do you suggest to help recruit others in your area?
Okay, well, you just tell them why you're doing it, and, you know, what you think can be achieved by them becoming an ambassador. There is nothing more powerful than a group of people calling for change. Well, all change that's ever been done in the world has been done by a small amount of people. You know, the suffragettes brought about voting for women, and I think maybe, you know, my history isn't strong on this, but I think that was 50 to 60 women, and they actually changed the political structure. And many causes in the world have been done by a small group of people just stating that things aren't good enough, you know, stating that things need to change. And that's what you need to say to people. You know, look, if you come alongside with this, we can change the world. It's going to be tough and it's going to be hard, and believe me, it will feel like pulling teeth sometimes, but we can change the world. We can make our society better. We can make our community better.
Yeah, I'd echo that, but also link it back to what motivates us, Alex, in a sense. You know, show why you're so passionate about this cause, but also share the successes with them. You know, sometimes it's easy for people to think, oh, that's a nice idea, but it's not going to make much difference, or my voice wouldn't make much difference. Yes, so when they start to see what you're achieving, they're like, wait, maybe if I did this, I could do something. Maybe if I, you know, got involved, I could make a difference. And they start to see that. I know personally, when I first got involved as an ambassador and started recruiting others, it started with people who were in my life, who got to see what a difference it was making to me and others who first got involved. And then they spread it out further, and it spread throughout our networks. Yeah. But it's the people immediately around you who get to see the impact of your ambassador work, who will be.
There's also a wonderful quote that says, "Moral justice is the strongest motivating. Moral outrage, not moral justice, of course. Sorry. Moral outrage is the strongest motivating force in politics." And when you come down to it, what could be more morally outrageous than, you know, innocent young children being abused and neglected? And that's what it comes down to. This is a moral campaign ultimately.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've just noticed Leslie wants to become an ambassador. Absolutely, Leslie, get in touch. You can go on the website, or you can email Alex as well. I don't know if you want to drop your email.
Yeah, you can.
In the comments, Alex.
I've got no access to the chat. You'll have to do it. It's it's awilliamson@wavetrust.org. And what I will emphasise is you don't need any experience. So you don't need to be a political guru. You don't need to come from a scientific background. You don't need to even really understand the science of adverse childhood experiences. You know, that's not a requirement. We will train you all in that. We will give you that knowledge base. So you can come to us with, you know, nothing but passion, and, you know, we will help you to realise the extent of what that passion can achieve. All you need is a desire to want to change the world.
Yeah, it's all you need. And I'm glad to see Leslie's already been in touch with Jay. So looking forward to welcome you to the team.
Yeah.
And yeah, does anyone else have? Let me double check I didn't miss any questions. I think Claire or Michelle had chucked a quick one in. Who are your heroes, Alex?
My heroes. What you mean politically or in life, Claire? You'll have to elaborate on that.
I've no idea. Claire, have you got a follow up to the question? If not, we'll just roll with either, really. Not getting an immediate response, Alex. You'll just have to wing it.
I hate to be I hate to be a cliche, but my hero is probably my father. I mean, he taught me everything I know. He installed a set of values in me. I want to replicate everything that he taught me about what it means to be a man and a human being.
Yeah, absolutely. Claire said both in the end. So
all right. Well, my political heroes, I guess, are the ones who believe that raising issues and fighting for what they believe is right is more important than career development. So, without going into the intricacies of political development, the easiest thing to do for a lot of people, and this is probably true of any workplace, it's not just unique to the political sphere. The easiest thing for people who want to progress is just to agree with everything and not rock the boat and just go along with the prevailing view, because it's easier from a career development point of view. So my heroes are the ones who actually do put the head above the pulpit and say, no, this isn't good enough. This has to improve. And if that means I have to sit on the backbenches for the next 20 years and bang the drum until something gets done, so be it. Those are my heroes, the one who actually say, look, I'm more interested in trying to resolve issues rather than develop my career.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think I'm along the same lines with you there, Alex.
And I guess my heroes as well are the people who've had lived experience and have said that it's not going to define them. It's not going to dictate their life. They can't do anything about what happened to them, but they are going to try and build on that and make life better for other people. And, you know, that is a great proportion of the people who are involved with 70-30, the people who have had bad experiences in childhood, the people who have had destroyed lives, the people who have come from all sorts of horrific circumstances, and they have built on that, and they have said, look, this isn't where my story ends. This isn't going to define me. This isn't going to be my life. I can't do anything about what's happened to me, but I am going to stop it for other people. I think anyone who can show that kind of resilience and strength is a tremendous person, and I salute my hat to all. I take off my hat to all of those people who have successfully overcome their life circumstances, because it proves that there is no limit to what can be achieved if you really want to do it.
Absolutely. Well, you've stolen my answer, Alex.
I'm sorry.
Not doing that.
No, Isabel, just forget I said that, and you can pretend you said it.
That's great. That's great. Well, we'll just add my name on at the end and pretend it's the same.
Because those are the people we're fighting for. You know, those are the people who have been a victim of horrific circumstances in their life and have decided to improve it. And that's kind of what we need. You know, more than the academic arguments, more than the scientific arguments, we need people at the forefront of this saying, "I was failed, I was let down. I'm damn well going to make sure it doesn't happen to other people."
Yeah,
those are my heroes.
Slightly further than that, in a sense of, I can think of, you know, the people in my immediate personal life who I see having the bravery, not even necessarily to push themselves out and campaign, but just the bravery to face everything that's coming at them in life head on, and to push themselves forward, and to still be some of the most, you know, hilarious and smart and motivating and kind people I've ever met, and kind of push through that. And I have to say, I think it's those people in my life who've definitely inspired me the most.
Because if I have some of the lived experience, my every natural inclination would be to just, you know, hide under the bed and put the sheet under my bed and say, I'm not going to go out into the world. You know, I'm just going to hide here where it's safe. I'm just going to hide here where nothing can happen to me. And I salute everyone who's gone out there and said, this isn't where my story ends.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. We've had various hashtags throughout, Stronger Together, The Cycle Ends With Me, etc., throughout the message, the comments and the messages. So I absolutely agree. Everyone who is sharing in that way is inspirational. And I'm not seeing any immediate other questions at the moment, so I might end things there, as I know we started later than planned. Thank you to everyone in the chat who's been involved, who's been commenting, and hopefully thank you to anyone who's watching this later on as well. And Alex, thank you so much. It's been an honor working with you these past 6 years, and thank you for coming on Alive.
And just as a little plug, guys, our next ambassador meeting is at 7 o'clock. Is next Thursday at 7 o'clock. If that's something, I mean, if you aren't an ambassador and you just want to kind of dip your toe in and see what happens, you're more than welcome to come along.
Absolutely, absolutely. Let me see if I can find your email address again. If you do want to come to the call as well and want to get sent the link, just drop Alex a quick email and get in touch, and we'll know. So yeah, it's awilliamson@wavetrust.org. And yeah, thank you everyone. Hope you have a great evening.
Yeah, bye. Thank you very much, Isabel. Bye then.
Thank you too. Bye.